One day, you're just sitting with your wife, watching TV. Then all of a sudden, the world changes. How'd it all happen so fast? No warning, no breaking news, just the sounds of explosions outside, and the screaming that would be drowned out with laughter. A week of watching the carnage and bloodshed being spilled in the streets, until there was nothing more but a silent emptiness. A few screams for help from a distance. An opportunity for Ian and Penny to leave the attic of their apartment. An attempt to leave Glasgow. The plan was to move out at night and follow the main road out of the city, but with every cackle and howl halting their movement, precious nighttime being wasted as Ian and Penny hid from the horrors that destroyed the streets. Nothing but absolute horror when seeing the city's orange glow. The city that was on fire. And seeing a group of people from a distance coming towards them. Not sure if they were people or one of them. Ian and Penny weren't obviously willing to find out. Nobody knows how it happened, where it all began. It was like seeing this world for the first time. It was like we lost control. That no matter how hard we tried digging our claws in, there was no control for what came. And that's how the world turned red so fast. And that's how Ian lost Penny. Nearly free from the city, Ian and Penny only needed to find a way to get across the freeway. They knew the risks, the dangers, speeding traffic and the killing, but freedom was only 6 lanes away. Ian was convinced they could make it. If they can take an advantage of the chaos, no one would notice them, but the dangers was unpredictable. Penny had almost lost her life to a fleeing vehicle, but that moment was when she was noticed. One of them used an infant to infect Penny. After everything Ian saw happening in the streets when it all began, he did not expect they would use an infant to infect others, but was already numb to the traumatic horror. And yet, Ian experienced intense fear when knowing that this was it for Penny. The last thing Penny said was that she loved Ian before telling him to run and taking her own life. When looking back, putting hopes in the child was very foolish. Hopes in the idea of a child. Rebirth, regeneration, the world made new, the future. After everything, no wonder why they went with the idea. Realistically, Ian was starting to see that this was both a foolish and fatal idea. Who is that comedian? You know, the one that said, "Your children aren't special"? Anya's boyfriend died a while back. Now all she has is her brother Mark. Every day Ian would see the fatal notion working its magic on the rest of the group. You may not see it right now, but Ian knew that there was a growing frustration. When they found her, nobody knew she was carrying a child until she began showing the signs. And now here they are, clinging on this idea of a future to ease the reality of their situation. Ian didn't want to say it, but Anya was just an illusion with disastrous results. Even though the frustration lingers and fades, every now and then it keeps coming back. During the summers, they would be in the highlands, up in the glens where it was cool, then come down to scavenge when the snow fell, Already the towns and cities nearby were isolated, nothing but ghost towns. For entertainment, there was Rob and Alec, a pair who were like a radio. John used to work on the rigs. Most of the time he kept to himself. Nobody knows his story, family, friends. Probably best that way. But the kind of guy you would want in a group. Harry was the interesting one. Claims to be Prince Harry. The Prince Harry. Even though many were convinced of this, you really couldn't tell with his face being like that, not that it mattered. Claims that when the guards grabbed him and his father to fly them to Baltimore, where there was a hidden bunker for the royal family, not only did they find the bunker being swarmed, but was attacked when the helicopter landed. The last thing Harry saw was Granny chewing off Charlie's buttocks. They found him somewhere near that area. Not sure if Harry's story has any merit or not. Not like anyone cares. Harry was definitely a good fighter, and of course, he did have that rifle. Aside from finding Harry, during their scavenging trips, they did find firearms, food, and supplies from farms and dead soldiers, and a few grenades, but no pistols. Ricky was a real godsend to the group, a paramedic. And there was Pat, the useless prick. If Ian were to be honest here, it's maybe because of Pat why nobody is putting too much focus on Enya and her brother. And there was Ian. Would you like to know a secret? Something that Ian has kept hidden from the group? When they found the grenades from the dead soldiers, they found 2 grenades, except nobody knows that Ian found a 3rd grenade. Ian decided to keep that one for himself. You know, for when the time came. It's been a while since Ian saw the crossed. Expected to see a few here and there. But nobody anticipated that there would come a day when there was over 40 wandering in these mountains. Maybe more. 2 groups, or 1, strung out. No reason why they would travel this far south. Unless the cross have no direction. Not surprising how they need no reason. Just wandering south, looking for the next city, perhaps. Maybe if the group keep low, they'll pass on. There was the idea of Harry sniping them with that rifle of his, but with a magazine and a half. The moment when Harry opens fire, when they reach effective range, he'll drop 15 for sure, 20 max before they're on them, assuming that every shot is a kill. So yeah, fuck no to that idea. Remember what was said about them thoughts over Pat, the useless prick of the group? There was reasons for that, especially when he failed to keep watch on the west side of the mountains, failing to let others know that there were a few more in the distance. If it wasn't for Alec, they would never have seen the big one flanked by 2 heading towards them. The 2 smaller ones were not much of a threat, but the big one, the leader, she was going to be a challenge. Immediately the group ran to the ridge nearby. Thankfully they were quick enough before being spotted, but just a matter of time before they're found. Fucking Pat. One of these days he's gonna end up making a mistake that's gonna get everyone killed. So what do you do in a situation like this? Any minute now they'll be right on them. Using the rifles will draw on the rest. But what choice do they have? The moment when these 3 are shot down, it'll be a miracle if they survive from the others. And just as Harry, John, and Ian was about to fire, that was when Alec had an idea. For a second, everyone thought he lost his mind when grabbing a stone and throwing it at the biggest one. Nobody did know what the fuck he was doing. But instead of the big one coming towards them in a murderous frenzy, she ended up attacking one of the others, assuming that she was attacked by one of her followers. Clever bastard. And Alec grabbing another stone, throwing it at the big one again, causing her to kill the other follower, splitting his head in half with that axe. Now the odds were starting to change. But comes the tricky part, which is taking out the leader without drawing in the rest. Thank God there was a plan for that. The plan was simple, but very risky. Alec didn't hesitate when acting as bait with a little flirtation. Immediately the giant woman chased Alec to the ridge, and as expected, failing to see the others nor realizing that this was a trap. Just as Alex stepped off the ridge and into the stream, a split second before the leader swung the axe for his head, that was when she ended up falling into the stream, the perfect opportunity to take her out by dropping a giant log onto her. Even though the giant woman was pinned, she still wasn't dead. That screaming, that yelping, could attract the others, and Ian jumping into the stream, running right towards her and keeping her face pinned down with his foot. Ian knew that this was the stupidest thing he ever did, but watching this bitch drown, feeling her teeth caving into his boot, yeah, very reckless. But God, did it feel so good. It just felt so good watching her drown. Nobody didn't say much after that. Everyone knew that Alec was the hero of the day, and once again Pat was a useless prick. There was no real celebration. Once again everyone kept to themselves, knowing that this was just a tiny victory in a losing battle. Just a little kick to keep on going, until the day came when they start facing the facts. The Crossed is going to kill everyone, and they're going to kill themselves. Everyone is going to die. The only plan that Ian and everyone else has is just keep moving forward until they die. Wake up every day with no reason to go on, and just keep moving, clinging onto some notion that, well, just clinging. This is no fucking Walking Dead. There is no hope. Everyone is going to die. But for today, it is nice to have an illusion or two. One Sunday morning. Ida always went to the 7 o'clock Sunday morning service at her church. Usually she heard the clanging of the church bells while she was eating breakfast, but this morning, she heard them while she was still in bed. That means I'm late, she thought. Ida jumped out of bed, quickly dressed and left without eating and looking at the clock. It was still dark outside, but it usually was dark at this time of the year. Ida was the only one in the street. The only sounds she heard was the clatter of her shoes on the pavement. Everybody already must be at church, she thought. Ida took the shortcut through the cemetery. Then she quietly slipped into the church and found a seat. The service had already begun. When she caught her breath, Ida looked around. The church was filled with people she had never seen before, but the woman next to her did look familiar. Ida smiled at her. It's Josephine Kerr, she thought. But she's dead. She died a month ago. Suddenly, Ida felt uneasy. She looked around again, as her eyes began to adjust to the dim light. Ida saw some skeletons in suits and dresses. This is a service for the dead, Ida thought. Everyone here is dead, except me. Ida noticed that some of them were staring at her. They looked angry, as if she had no business there. Josephine Kerr leaned towards her and whispered, "Leave, right after the benediction, if you care for your life." When the service came to an end, the minister gave his blessing. "Lord bless you and keep you," he said. "The Lord make his face to shine upon you." Ida grabbed her coat and walked quickly toward the door. When she heard footsteps behind her, she glanced back. Several of the dead were coming toward her. Others were getting up to join them. "The Lord lift up his countenance to you," the minister went on. Ida was so frightened she began to run. Out the door she ran with a pack of shrieking ghosts at her heels. "Get out!" one of them screamed. Another shouted, "You don't belong here," and ripped her coat away. As Ida ran through the cemetery, a third grabbed the hat from her head. "Don't come back," it screamed, and shook its arm at her. By the time Ida reached the street, the sun was rising, and the dead had disappeared. Did this really happen? Ida asked herself. Or have I been dreaming? That afternoon, when Ida's friends brought over her coat and hat, or what was left of them, they had been found in the cemetery, torn to shreds.
but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This